Everybody, please watch this, because tonight officials at a park in Illinois are investigating an incident in which a man harassed a woman because she was wearing a T-shirt with Puerto Rican flag on it, calling it un-American. The woman asked a police officer for help, but he seems to just walk away. She recorded the encounter. She posted it on Facebook. Here it is.
You're not going to change us. You know that?
I'm not trying to change anyone. No. I'm just trying to come here for a birthday party.
The world is not going to change the United States of America.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
You should not be wearing that in the United States of America.
Okay.
Are you a citizen?
Yes, I am a citizen.
Are you a United States citizen?
Can you please get away from me?
Then you should not be
Can
wearing
you please get away from me?
Wearing United States
Officer,
America
I feel highly uncomfortable. Can you please
citizen?
grab him?
Are you an American citizen?
Please, officer.
I'm an American citizen. I would like to know, is she an American citizen? Why is she wearing
So, what was the officer doing? Didn't do anything. Okay, well, I want to talk about this now with CNN political commentators Keith Boykin, Angela Rye, Matt Lewis, and Mike Shields. Hello. Disturbing video. What did you think, Angela, when you first saw it?
One, I was trying to figure out who let his drunk in the park to begin with. Number two, I thought about the fact that this officer was in La La Land. I think what's more unbelievable to me than the video is that the officer's just on administrative leave, or I'm sorry, desk duty. He's not even on administrative leave, so he can just, you know, continue to collect a check without being in the sun at the park. So it's just frustrating to continue to see these incidents happen and no consequences.
So, Mike, as we can all see, the police officer just stands by, ignores the woman's pleas for help. The man got back in the woman's face a second time, and even then, it was a second officer who finally stepped in. Watch this.
Can you please get away from me? Can you please get away from me? Can you please get away from me?
Puerto Rico is an American state.
Hey, buddy. It is an
Yes, they are.
State.
They vote for our president.
You should wear.
Hey,
calm down. Get away.
Why do you think the first police officer didn't help this woman, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know. And that was actually the first thing I thought when I watched this as well was, what's this guy doing? I mean, not just the words that the man's using, the threatening behavior. And I give the woman a lot of credit how she handled herself. You know, I'd love to see that old man say that to a Puerto Rican Marine. I don't think it would have worked out so well for that guy. And I'm glad to see at least the other police came and did the right thing on this. And the one thing I'll say is that this sort of thing has been going on for a while in this country. Racism has been going on for decades, and now we actually have people filming it so that we can have conversations about it like this and help put an end to it, have a national dialogue about what is happening, that these things are real. There's too often that people, especially white people, have not necessarily been able to see this and therefore understand that this is real and that it actually happens to people on a daily basis. This guy's a jerk, obviously. Most Americans don't agree with this. The great thing is, I saw this on Facebook, and the overwhelming reaction of everybody was, this is terrible. And that's the reaction Americans should have when they see this, and I'm glad it's getting exposed so that we can all join together and say, this is unacceptable. Puerto Ricans are Americans, and even if she wasn't an American, that's not appropriate behavior to treat anybody in our country.
Yeah. So listen, here's what the Forest Preserves Preserves of Cook County, I should say, tweeted. After the incident, we immediately launched an investigation pursuant to our personnel policies into the response of our officer. The investigation is ongoing. The officer involved has been assigned to desk duty pending the outcome. The intoxicated individual involved in the incident was arrested and charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Matt, should he have kept his job?
They have to go through the investigation, but based on what I saw, I don't think so. I mean, police are here to serve and protect, and I think that you need to intervene. I think that if you watch that video, clearly it got to a point where there was escalation. You can hear the woman saying, the woman, of course, is very calm and I think very polite, and really, most of us would have been much more rattled than she was, but she's saying, look, I have a permit. I paid a permit. This is a birthday party. Would you please step back? She said it repeatedly, and then she even summoned the police officer and asked him to intervene, and he didn't do anything. So based on what I saw, maybe there's more, but based on what I saw, I don't think he should have a job.
Back now with Keith Boykin, Angela Rye, Matt Lewis, and Mike Shields. So, Keith, the incident we were talking about in Illinois isn't an isolated one. We have been talking about these kinds of racist incidents almost weekly on my show here. Another recent example is a 91-year-old Mexican man visiting family in California. Was beaten with a brick, told to go back to Mexico. He's a permanent resident, legally here. You say, Keith, that the current political climate right now is fueling this kind of anger. Explain that.
Right. We've always had private citizens who've been policing black and brown bodies going back for decades. You know, Emmett Till in 1955, George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin. But what's going on now is that we have a culture where I think the President of the United States is feeding this environment. He's not the cause of it, but he's feeding it. He's not speaking out forcefully when these things happen. And it requires presidential leadership to stand up when something like this happens. George W. Bush famously spoke out against Islamophobia and went to a mosque after the 9/11 attacks and said, we're not fighting a war on Islam, we're fighting a war on terror.
There's a video of it.
This is what's happening right now is a reflection of it's a sad state of affairs. America is being divided and pulled apart, and unfortunately we don't have leadership at the top to bring us back together.
Yeah. So I have to put this, listen, Mike, CNN's K-Files uncovered, it's a disturbing social media post by a Republican House candidate from New Jersey, Seth Grossman. In posts that are now deleted, Grossman wrote, he said, diversity leads to Muslims killing Christians. Another post Grossman wrote, Kwanzaa is a fake holiday made by black racists. He also promoted opinion pieces from white nationalist websites. You can solve for the National Republican Congressional Committee, which has pulled its support for him. But Grossman says he is not dropping out. Why is this man still a Republican candidate?
Well, the local voters in that area, I mean, the party can't go in, as we know, can't go in and force someone off the ballot from the national level. The national party is done, and yes, I work for the NRCC, and I absolutely applaud Chairman Stivers in the position they took, which is that they're not going to give any support to this candidate, but the local district in New Jersey has to decide whether or not they're going to keep him on the ballot or try to replace him. That's up to them. I hope they do. There is no place in the Republican Party for that kind of rhetoric. One thing I want to disagree with Keith a little bit on this is that this is not a partisan issue. There are racists in both parties. There are good people in both parties. And, you know, in Michigan, you had a whole brouhaha where the Democratic Party was fighting itself and using racism about a Muslim candidate who was trying to run for governor there. This sort of thing happens all over the place. I do think it would be better if our leaders spoke out about it. I think that there's a lack of leadership on both sides. During the inauguration,
Mike, when I hear both sides, I hear.
But why are Republican voters? Hold on.
I'm not saying both sides. Don't try to pull me into some Charlottesville both sides thing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's a lack of leadership in both parties. During the inauguration, my son, who was 14 at the time, was called a Nazi by somebody walking into an event. There are ugly people all over the country in this tribal world that we live in, and I think it's a mistake to try and assign some kind of partisan aspect to this. In fact, I think it does a disservice, because I think that woman, the Puerto Rican woman, needs us all to understand what she's going through, and if we make it a political fight, then some people shut the whole thing off.
Mike, let me just ask, but why are Republican voters choosing these kinds of candidates, someone who says things like that? I think that's a fair question.
I don't think that they knew that about him when they nominated him, and now they've got to do something about it to fix it. And I think that that's a shame. I reject it. I don't think Republicans should support that. The congressman who has that seat now, who's retiring, Frank LoBiondo, is not that kind of Republican, and he's held that seat for 20 years.
Yeah, I've got 10 seconds,
that's not who
Angela.
the Republicans are that are in that part of New Jersey, and I hope they do something about it.
Angela, I've got a few seconds. Go on.
Yeah, so really quick, Mike, I completely agreed with you about the issue with the Puerto Rican, the woman wearing the Puerto Rican shirt. I completely agree with you, Keith, about this man who was beaten by a black woman in LA County, by the way. So I don't have any compassion for anyone who behaves in this way. But I resent the fact that we would at all try to liken what happens on the more progressive end of the spectrum to what happens overwhelmingly now in the Republican Party. I think that it's very dangerous for us to create a false equivalency to say that there are bad people on both sides. That is exactly the Charlottesville argument. And so just really quick, I think it's very important that your party begins to be more accountable. You said there's no room for that rhetoric. That rhetoric has started at the top at 1600 Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's got to be the last word. I'm way over. Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching.